In this video, we want to take a moment to walk through the basics of the gameplay. Now in this one, we're going to be looking at cards made up from the Jesus and the Gospel of Mark set, the 90 card expansions, which in Season 1 are Jesus and the Gospel of Mark, and War of the Nine Kings, which unpacks Genesis 14. So the basic of the gameplay, as you look at this, is the faith timeline, which is represented here. So location cards, which in every set are going to have this purple background, are always going to go here. These are the basis of the faith timeline that is played out here. So depending on the difficulty level that you want to play, you would reveal the starting locations after you shuffle that. And so the max that you could ever have is 5. And so if at any point the locations would have to move past, that automatically means that you are unsuccessful in clearing the faith timeline. So all of the faith locations are going to have a faith cost. And so we see in the biblical narrative that people are always moving from place to place. You see Jesus in his encounters, he's going through all these places. And the other stories, these are all the places in which people navigate in the biblical narrative. The main play happens then upon what is revealed across the faith timeline. So this is called the encounter deck. So the encounter deck is going to be made up of a handful of different types of cards. Now, based on the level of difficulty you want to play, you can take it right out of the box and use the standard encounter deck, or over time with the season, you can combine cards and have them. And so this is made up of different sets of cards. You could have something like a faithless card here. You could also have a support card, and we'll explain what happens when those get revealed. You also have trap cards, meaning the instant that is revealed upon there, that there is something that happens. And you also just have event cards that some of them have a cost. You could reveal a neutral card. Some other cards also have an effect that goes with it. Let's see if we can find one of these. For instance, help my unbelief. And so when this is revealed, that ends up going into that player's hand. So let me just show that if it's a little confusing. And so the base of all of this is going to be, at the beginning of each round is the encounter reveal. Now, the way this works is that each of these are going to go across here to start, and then these get turned over. So there's a maximum amount based on the difficulty level of how many cards are allowed to be active or in play on that location. And after that is when overflow goes into effect. So if you're playing, for instance, if you're learning to play with younger, you can go up to 3. If you want a more challenging difficulty level, you can have a max of 2, or you could set 1. We wanted to give the players a little bit of space to engage on their own, to kind of navigate those tensions, to make challenges. For instance, there's also the reality of you don't know what's ahead. And so we want to kind of honor that of, throughout the Bible, we see this, that people navigate these spaces and not really knowing what's ahead, right? We walk by faith, not by sight. And so we wanted that to be a part of the game. And so when these are turned over, if this was playing solo or my first round, here's what would happen right here. Right. So anytime that there is a faithless or an event cost, those stay revealed. Now, a trap card would instantly go into effect. Now, with this being the first turn, right, I don't have a demon or unclean spirit in the discard pile, so I am spared from this. We played the other night, and we were spared from that. And so that just ends up going straight into the discard. And so the encounter round is where you start. And then every round at the beginning, if you're playing solo, you would get 3 in your party. So you would shuffle your deck and you would get them at random. Whenever they go into play, they get faith tokens. So this is here. So that's the amount of faith this character has and that they can play to navigate across the events. And so we have all different types here. And and so you see all the different characters from there. Now, they have some that have different bonuses or effects. A lot of these in this one are just the additional faith tokens if there's certain characters, and we wanted to try to honor that of what were they, who were they interacting with in the story. And so, the Gentile woman, this was, a woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit, come out of her. And so the faith that she gets is, exponential, because she was the one who fell at his feet and worshiped him. And so we wanted to kind of honor some of the mechanics of the game around the stories that we read in Scripture. You have like Mary Magdalene, and then a lot of these are just the disciples. And so we have different types here. We have, right, the leper. And so all of these cards have different faith costs. And so you start with 3. And so you would shuffle, you would deal 3. And then at the end of your turn, you actually get to draw an additional faithful and add it to your party. And so based on how many people you're playing with would determine how many you start with. And so there's different interactions that can happen. And based on what you do, can also determine other people's cards and how they play. When we were playing the other night, right, there's interactions where certain faith lists on the card give additional faith or less faith. We wanted to kind of honor some of those. And also that you may have a card, for instance, in the base set, right, Abram and Sarai. And so you see some of this where Sarah, she has less faith when Abram is there. And we see this play on some of these characters where from the scripture you see these interactions. And so as this would go on, it would just continue. Now, until I clear this total, right, the goal is to clear the faith timeline, or if you're playing easy, just to be able to clear 3 locations. So I cannot clear any of these until, right, there are no active cards here. So you always have to play down and be clearing those as they get revealed. So as I go, I can play, but if I don't have 11 enough to clear Judas or to clear the event of Fled, then at the next round, there would be another encounter round. And so it's always face down because it has to go through and play from overflow first before cards are revealed. And so just with that too, we'll see if any of these come into my hand. So for instance, a support card, if it's my player's turn or any of these, would go right to me. So Jesus feeds the 5,000 because it's an event cost, stays on the timeline. But these 2 actually go into the player's hand that they can play. After the encounter round is when you can play cards. And so I could choose to play either one of these. And so again, these have effects. The neutral cards often prevent a faithless, meaning if they're revealed on that location, they go straight to the discard. Or, right, a support does different things. Often it is no faithless. Sometimes it allows you to play on the first timeline and gain extra faith tokens. There's other support that allow you to play the encounter deck face up so that you're aware of what's coming. And then often with a trap card, it's going to clear any of the neutral that are on there. And so just a little side note with that, the reason we did neutral is we wanted to kind of honor these interactions with people in the scripture who may not be following Jesus in faith, but also aren't necessarily going against the ways of God. And so this was a way to kind of honor some of these characters we see. For instance, the man carrying water, as we see here. Right, Jesus sends his disciples and tells them, go into the city, and there's going to be this dude carrying a jug of water. Right, follow him. Okay, there's very little interaction. He's really just carrying this jug of water. And so we wanted to kind of honor some of those characters in this way. And so with that, there's a lot of just different interactions that can happen. And so you see that, and some of these have higher cost. You see some of these moments where, right, they will get a certain location. For instance, here, if Roman soldier was revealed because the Praetorium is one of our active locations, it would move from 4 to 8. And this is where you can play the shadow tokens if you have the deluxe base set to increase that. You have these other moments where there's right, a handful of event cards, but they actually go into your hand, and you can use it to refresh the faith pool. So as you're playing, you gain faith tokens when a faithful enters play, but unless you play a card or there's a bonus that happens, you have to have an event card to play to refresh their faith pool. And so again, there's all these different ones that happen, different support. Different traps, right? And so there's these moments where certain trap cards, for instance, this one, any active faithful with a faith amount less than 6 gets discarded. And so you see some of these interactions. There's other cards like sleep. And so if there's a faithless in play or a faithful in play with no faith tokens, they're discarded from play. And so that's just a little brief snapshot. I guess it's not as brief of walking through the basic ideas that you can play out across. You can play up In Valley of Shadow set, we actually have a shadow mode, which adds extra effects, extra penalties across the timeline. Things that are going to reduce the amount of faith that you have, increase the amount of shadow that is happening across the timeline, and just add an extra challenge. And again, we want to, all the cards have different interactions that they have that would be honoring to what we see in the scripture, that if it is something that happened there interacting with a person in that place, that you will see that played out and interacted on those cards.